What if we evaluated your belief in the gospel solely by how generous you were? What if we evaluated your belief in the gospel solely by how non-judgmental you were, how accepting you were, and how you treated the poor? What James is saying is those who genuinely encounter mercy, they become merciful. And so from one angle, you can say that only those who show mercy toward others should expect it from God, because if you don't show mercy, there's no way you really could have experienced it. The little indicator light that you have received mercy is that you become merciful. Jesus repeated this theme often in the Gospels, and it's why some of what he says confuses you. He taught us to pray, for example, forgive us our debts as we forgive our debtors. In other words, we can expect God's forgiveness in similar measure to how we forgive others. Because again, it's not that we're earning God's forgiveness, it's that the sign we've received the mercy of the gospel is that we show the mercy of the gospel. Showing mercy and receiving others in mercy is the indicator light you've experienced the gospel. Look at that last line. Mercy triumphs over judgment. In this context, that phrase means that on the final day, watch this, your acts of mercy will triumph over judgment. In this context, that phrase does not mean that on the last final day, God's mercy will triumph over judgment in his heart. His mercy triumphs over judgment. No, it's that your mercy will triumph over his judgment of you because your acts of mercy will demonstrate that you understood the gospel and you received it. By the way, that is not original with James. James picked this principle up from his half-brother Jesus. Matthew 25, Jesus said that on judgment day, he will separate the sheep from the goats. And in this particular judgment scene, everybody present believes the same thing. They all confess Jesus is Lord. But he divides that group of believers into the sheep and the goats. The sheep on his right, the goats on his left. In fact, stay right where you are in James. We'll come right back to you, but let me just walk you through this passage real fast. Verse 34, Jesus says, then the king will say to those on his right, to the sheep, come, you who are blessed by my Father. Inherit the kingdom prepared for you from the foundation of the world. For I was hungry and you gave me food. I was thirsty and you gave me drink. I was a stranger and you welcomed me. I was naked and you clothed me. I was sick and you visited me. I was in prison and you came to me. And the righteous will answer him, Lord, when did we see you hungry? When were you on earth and we fed you? When were you thirsty? We gave you drink. When did we see you as a stranger and welcome you? When were you naked and we clothed you, and in prison and we visited you? And the king will answer them, truly I say unto you, as you did it to one of the least of these, my brothers, you did it to me. And then he will say to those on the left, depart from me, you cursed, into the eternal fire prepared for the devil and his angels. I was hungry and you gave me no food. I was thirsty and you gave me no drink. I was a stranger, you didn't welcome me. Naked and you didn't clothe me. And sick and in prison, you didn't visit me. Then they also will answer him and say, Lord, when did we miss doing all those things? I mean, we would have done it for you if we knew it was you. And he'll respond by saying, truly, I say to you, as you did it not to one of the least of these, you did it not unto me. And these will go away into eternal punishment, but the righteous into eternal life. I want you to let this settle in, Summit. According to Jesus, look, the only difference between the sheep and the goats was what they did and did not do. They were not separated according to what they believed. They were not separated based on who prayed a prayer and who got baptized. They all believed the same thing. They'd all prayed the prayer. They'd all been baptized. The difference between the sheep and the goats was whether their understanding of the gospel produced tangible acts of mercy in them. And again, I want to be super clear. It's not that their acts of mercy earn salvation. Salvation is a free gift that we only receive by faith. But their acts of mercy demonstrated they'd experienced salvation. So on Judgment Day, their acts of mercy triumphed over God's judgment. Their acts of mercy demonstrated that they'd understood and embraced the gospel. So here's the question. It's obvious. You ready for it? What if we evaluated your belief in the gospel solely by how generous you were? What if we evaluated your belief in the gospel solely by how non-judgmental you were, how accepting you were, and how you treated the poor? Now, I know some of you are gonna get overwhelmed right now. Just because you have relapses in this or you're inconsistent with this doesn't mean you're not saved. In fact, in Galatians 2, Paul confronted Peter, the apostle, the leader of the early church, because Peter had started to act in a racist manner. Peter, the leader of the early church, would eat and fellowship with Jews, but not with Gentiles. So Paul confronted him publicly, and he said, Peter, you are not acting in line with the gospel. He doesn't say, hey, Peter, you're not really saved. We all need renewals to bring our behavior in line with the gospel. So I'm not trying to tell you you're not saved, but I'm just saying the point remains how you treat the poor or how forgiving you are or how accepting you are is the indicator light of whether you understand the gospel. That's James's big point. You want to know if you understand the gospel really? It's shown in your generosity of spirit toward people around you, whether that means accepting those who are different, receiving those with troubled past, or sharing resources with those who do not have them. So let's end our time. Let's just end it with a few really, really down-to-earth, practical application questions, okay? In what ways are you personally involved with the poor? That'd be my first one. If Matthew 25 happens tonight, what are you gonna hear from Jesus? Let me be clear. We got some amazing people in our church doing amazing Matthew 25 type ministries with prisoners and unwed mothers and high school dropouts or kids here at the church or students. But I will just tell you as a church, we are not known for this as much as we are known for other things. And we should be known for this. I've been praying about ways that we can up our engagement with the poor of our city, which leads to this question we have to ask as a church. My second question, how many of our ministries in the church are focused on those who cannot pay us back? Let me tell you why I phrase it like that. A lot of our ministries and facilities bring people into the church, people with bank accounts and means, and they can help pay our bills. And they are indeed ministries. I'm not taking away from them. But in another sense, having those kinds of ministries, you business people recognize that just makes good business sense for us. So we have to ask, are we running a business here, or do we have ministries toward people who will never be able to pay us back? Over the years, we've talked about the homeless, orphan, prisoner, unwed mother, high school dropout in our city, and we have seen some amazing things happen in each of those areas. In fact, one of the ministries we've invested in the most is the prison ministry. In the last year, some of our members have started some amazing transitional housing and job programs to help restore prisoners to full functioning in society. It's amazing to just watch it happen, watch you guys go with it. We are funding thousands of compassion children around the world in refugee centers in places like Ukraine and India. So there's some amazing things happening, but honestly, as a church, we got a lot of room to grow here. We are praying right now about providing affordable, faith-driven daycare for single working moms in our community, as an example. One of the ways we've tried to apply this principle is through church planting. Each year, Summit, we give away millions of dollars to missions and to church plants. And like I've explained to you, those plants rarely benefit us. Right? They're not good for our bottom line in one sense. I mean, like I've told you, not one time ever in all the churches we planted has one called me up and been like, hey, we got extra money in our budget left over. We thought we'd give it back to you. I always tell you, church plants are like teenagers. All they want is your money and your affirmation and then for you to leave them alone. That's all they want. But we do it because we know that's about the kingdom, not about the Summit Church. We got close to 300 of our members serving overseas right now. And we give millions of dollars to the International Mission Board each year to help fund them and to other mission agencies. Of course, we got to ask, are we planting those churches? And are we planting campuses as much in poor areas as we are in affluent ones? Now, we're trying to be intentional with that. For example, we've planted churches in red light districts in India and slum adjacent areas in the Dominican Republic. Closer to home, we planted campuses in several prisons and in many poorer urban areas. There have been a couple parts of our city that we became convinced after talking to people there that the style of our church would not reach them. So instead of putting a campus there, we funded an independent church plant there in that area instead of a campus. Right now, we're funding a Farsi network of church plants over in Central Asia. Each week, we host Hispanic, Arabic, and Mandarin language gatherings at our church each week. So we are trying to be intentional with this, but we got to stay vigilant. For example, we don't yet have a great strategy for reaching rural areas. But we're going to keep all this in front of our church if we are truly gospel people. Here's one and a half more, a little closer to home. How quickly do you identify and reach out to disconnected people in this church? Is this a church that's a welcoming community, especially for those who feel isolated elsewhere? Or do they experience the same hostility in here that they would out there? I mean, y'all, who can forget that moving scene in the movie 42 based on Jackie Robinson's life, where Jackie Robinson, remember this, he's standing all by himself on the baseball field as all those Cincinnati fans are calling him the worst names. Jackie was the only black player in the Major League Baseball, in the league. He was the recipient of the most despicable kinds of hatred. And they're in this scene as Jackie stands there all by himself, all alone. Some of you remember this. One of his white teammates, Pee Wee Reese, just walks out to him, chewing tobacco, puts his arm around Jackie's shoulder, looks up into the stands and says, Jackie, I want them to know. I want them to know that you're my teammate and I stand with you. It is so moving. It's one of those, I'm glad we're in a dark theater so nobody can see my tears kind of moments. There is something powerful in showing love to somebody that the world says is not worthy of love. Church, this ought to be the place where people from various ethnicities and classes and backgrounds put their arms around each other and love each other. Is that what people experience here? Or do they experience the same isolation in here that they do out there? How quickly do you identify and reach out to disconnected people in the church? Or how about people who just look alone at church? Now, let's make this really practical, okay? How quickly do you reach out and talk to somebody who looks alone? I hear so many people complain that they went to some church and nobody ever talked to them. Rebecca McLaughlin, our friend here, she's been here several times. She says, an alone person in the church is an emergency. Your friends, she says, they can wait. Meet them at Chipotle later. At church, you need to find those people who look alone and introduce yourself to them. Then introduce them to somebody else. When somebody is sitting alone on their phone, she says, you must approach them and you must ask them if they've got somebody to sit with. It should not be said that they came to church and left without anybody knowing their name. So what if we reserved, let's just say the first 7 minutes right before church starts and the 7 minutes right after, just to do this? Wouldn't that be a way of demonstrating the gospel, saying, here you matter and you are important. You're not invisible in here. Do you know what kind of place this would become if we did just that? Honestly, it's one of the things that irritates me about you guys that cruise in 10 minutes late or leave 5 minutes before we dismiss. It's not that I'm mad that you're missing part of the service. It's that you treat church like it's a religious show instead of a welcoming family that you're a part of. When people say that the church is unfriendly and it feels like a big production, you're the problem. And don't even get me started on you guys that are still sitting at home in your pajamas streaming online when health-wise you can and should be back in church, okay? If you got health issues, I get it, that's fine. If you're traveling, I understand. But some of you are still sitting at home right now on your couch because you've reduced church to a program you watch, and that is not church at all. Hey, James is punchy, I get to be a little bit punchy too, okay? Here's the last one, the half one. How quickly do you embrace people of questionable circumstances? You the kind of person who, if somebody doesn't fit just the right profile, just the right pedigree, they come from questionable circumstances, that you keep your distance from them? My quiet time reading this week took me through John 4. I was thinking about this woman that Jesus found by the well. I mean, y'all, let's think about it. Just put that in modern times. This is a woman who clearly did not know how to run a family. She'd had not one, not two, not three, not four, but 5 failed marriages. And she's shacking up now with a guy who's not even her husband. For many of us, this is the kind of woman you would whisper about or complain about. It's not somebody you want in your small group. It's not somebody you want hanging around your family and influencing your kids. And yet Jesus made her the greatest evangelist in Samaria. Would you have recognized that when it happened? Would you have embraced her? Y'all, Christianity is supposed to be good news for the poor. So here's the question. Does it feel that way at the Summit Church? And what do you need to change so that it does? I called this message People Who Don't Belong in Church. And I hope you see that the irony is that there is no one who doesn't belong in church except for those who think that their status makes them more welcome here than others. This is a place where the entry doors are red, so to speak, because broken outcast sinners find welcome and acceptance in the arms of their Father, and we should demonstrate that in how we greet people and how we receive people and what we do with our money.